Welcome to the Voice of Putnam County Business. This is the podcast of the Putnam County Business Council, where we will be discussing all things related to Putnam County business climate and economic development in the county. We host Nick DeAndrea, a general manager of Park Ford. He is a director of the Putnam County Business Council, and also Nat Prentice of Prentice Investment Management, LLC. Nat is also the president of the Putnam County Business Council and also president of the Cold Spring Chamber of Commerce. We will welcome our hosts right after a brief message from our sponsor.
When Country Willow Furniture found people staying at home instead of furnishing their homes during the pandemic, the store worried about the loans that fueled their dramatic growth. But Tompkins Bank knew that solid relationships, like solid furniture, last far into the future. The value of a bank in your corner, the values of a bygone era. Tompkins gives you both, and the best banking relationship you'll ever have. Tompkins, your bank of choice. Find out more at tompkinsbank.com.
Well, welcome back, listeners, to the Voice of Putnam County Business. After a little break, I'm glad to see you again, Nat.
Good to see you too, Nick. You're looking ever so spry.
Appreciate it.
Well, we're lucky. We're fortunate that we have a great guest. We're joined today by Doug Cunningham, who is the publisher and editor of the Putnam County Courier, as well as the Putnam County News and Recorder. Doug, welcome to the Voice of Business in Putnam County. We're delighted to have you.
Good to be here.
How's life in the local newspaper business?
Life's intriguing in the local newspaper business. It's a wacky time. I mean, my whole life has been in newspapers, basically.
Some big ones too?
Yeah, I worked in Middletown for 20 years, and Middletown at the time was a large paper.
What was the paper called?
Times Herald Record.
Right.
And it was owned by Ottaway, which was owned by Dow Jones. And there were a number of years when the Dow Jones profits actually came from Middletown, New York. And the Wall Street Journal did not actually make money. But Dow Jones made money because Dow Jones had Ottaway. Anyway, so I went to school at Kansas University. I am a KU basketball fan, and I believe they will have a team that advances come March and April.
They got a shot.
They have a shot. They're having a tricky season right now. But
Things you don't know about Doug Cunningham, or at least I didn't.
That's why it's a game. You can go either way.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, brain has changed a lot, but fundamentally, good journalism hasn't changed that much. I mean, the things I learned at KU are still the things that guide how we do things.
Well, that's Doug, that keeping your independence and having your point of view, and at the same time pleasing a bunch of advertisers, that strikes me as a delicate balance. Is that?
Well, the answer is that is a delicate balance, but let us remember that the advertisers are there because we deliver an audience and a demographic that they want. They're not there because they like what we print. And if we judged our success strictly on whether advertisers like what we print, I mean, that just doesn't work. I mean, look, for instance, at our own Putnam County government, which last year, 2023, decided that it did not want to publish the legal notices in the Courier or the News and Recorder.
Legal notices that the state or the government requires them to publish.
New York State requires them to publish these notices in a newspaper that carries news of general interest, that has a paid subscriber base, and that comes out at least weekly. And we meet all of those qualifications. But the legislature, because some members, a majority of members, was unhappy with our coverage, wanted to punish speech that they didn't like. And it's no more complicated than that. They were unhappy. They wanted to punish us by taking away money that they thought would drive us out of business. But obviously it hasn't.
Didn't work.
Now, for the News and Recorder, this situation was especially tricky because there are no other papers that carry legal notices that circulate in Phillipstown and Putnam Valley. We're it. So not only did the legislators punish us, the papers, they also punished the people of Phillipstown and Putnam Valley.
And that situation has been rectified, has it?
Well, this year they appointed the PCNR as an official paper, but not the Courier. So yes, the situation with the PCNR has been rectified. But I think, though, that if you look at recent events, the county is still somewhat divided. And there are some lawmakers that aren't really fond of Phillipstown.
So,
But they like people like Dick, they may not care for me so much from Phillipstown.
Everyone would like him.
Yeah, Dick's actually quite a likable guy.
I'm kind of curious about what you just said, because it sounds like a concept of censorship in a way, where
Well,
they're not
it
getting the word.
is
Yeah,
censorship.
they're
That's exactly it.
they're not allowing the word to be spread through your avenue, and which is only detrimental to the communities that you're talking with.
Right, right. See, that there has come to be, and this is an unfortunate development, and I don't know if it's because of Facebook or online or what, but there has come to be this idea that somehow newspaper articles or television articles or radio articles, that they're bad if you don't agree with them. So there's become very much like a self-fulfilling echo chamber. And these legislators were upset that we didn't print whatever they wanted. And some of them were upset that we wrote too much about Phillipstown lawmaker Nancy Montgomery. Well, legislator Montgomery is the only Democrat on the panel. So naturally, they disagreed with her.
Mm-hmm.
We just reflected that disagreement. But the legislators, a majority of them, then sought to use county money to punish free speech they didn't like, which is kind of odd considering that they all, we think, believe in the Constitution and they believe in the Bill of Rights and the amendments and you know, everyone many people in Putnam County believe in the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a First Amendment too.
Right, sure.
The one that guarantees us religion and free speech and freedom of assembly and so on. So yeah, it's a striking thing, but it's just one more thing. I mean, every week there are 200 little details that go into each paper.
And you do 199 of the 200 things.
No, I don't do 199. My partner and wife does a lot. And she is actually the creative force in terms of how the paper appears, and is a far more talented designer on the advertising front than I am. My forte is messaging, not designing.
Right.
But we only have 5 employees.
Right.
So if something is going to get done.
5 employees between both papers.
Right.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
That's wild. I would have guessed way more than that.
Well, and many people would have, but I mean, one of the dynamics of business today is that, and any of the people you deal with, and I'm sure your family's business, I mean, you've got to have your costs and your payroll
Certainly
have got to match the business you do.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's one of the challenges every business in Putnam County faces. And we saw that during the pandemic. We're seeing it still. I mean, New York's a tough place to do business in.
What is the state of local newspapers nationally? I mean, did they exist, or have they grouped under larger publishers? How many are there many independent publishers such as yourself?
There actually are many, and New York State is fortunate in that we have more independent or small group owned newspapers than most other states. We have one of the largest trade associations in the country. The spring convention of the New York Press Association is actually the largest such journalism gathering in the country now. It used to be, when I was in Middletown, there were two big conventions the top editors went to. There was the APME, which was the Associated Press Managing Editors, and there was the American Society of Newspaper Editors. And the top editors would go to these and they'd, have presentations and sessions. Those are gone now. Now it is trade groups like the New York Press Group that is leading the way on training advertising salespeople and training journalists and training business people on how newspapers work. But mixed is the best word you can use to describe it. I mean, newspapers are failing or closing. I mean, some are not failing, they're just deciding to close at a high rate.
And that's what are the reasons they're closing? They can't make any money.
Well, there are several reasons. I mean, one is that some people, I mean, it used to be we had, if you go back to when I was 15 or 20, we had 3 television networks. If we were lucky, we had a local newspaper that was a weekly and a nearby newspaper that was a daily. And everyone kind of worked from the same media environment. Now we have Facebook, and some number of people have turned to that. The thing that bothers me about that so much is that so much of it on there isn't true.
Yeah, right.
It's not credible. And one of the things I'm disappointed in is, why are we so gullible? Why do we believe that? Why do we think that that is more credible than what is in our printed newspaper? But then there are other broader reasons. I mean, one is printing costs have gone up hugely. I mean, they have probably, since we have owned the papers, they've easily doubled. That's a big cost. That's our second biggest cost.
How many copies do you print a week?
2,000 of each paper. But in small papers, the cost of printing is really the cost of the setup. It's not the cost of the actual paper.
Sure.
I mean, to save money on printing, we'd have to get to zero. I mean, having 200 people do it online isn't actually a savings. It would save us like $10. The savings has to come from getting entirely from print to digital, as opposed to, say, a large paper like the New York Times, where they can shift people to online, print 200,000 fewer copies, which actually will save them money, and they can add digital subscribers, virtually no cost. Wall Street Journal now has twice as many digital subscribers as it had before the pandemic. That's astounding. That's really positive. But back to weekly papers. So printing's a big cost. You've also had kind of a collapse of the traditional advertisers that supported the local paper.
What do you guys do for advertising? Do you use?
Well, I was going to mention that because, I would say probably 3 or 4 years ago, Ford came out and they give us co-op dollars, right? So they subsidize the money that we spend towards our advertising.
Right.
And they said 3 or 4 years ago, we no longer support anything that's revolving around traditional advertising. So we're not going to give you any money towards that type of advertising. And we said, well, we're in a small town. we're the Putnam County in general is not massive, and our target audience isn't massive. Our customers are in our backyard, and where we want to advertise is in our backyard.
Right.
And they're forcing us to do the opposite by spending money elsewhere, mostly on digital advertising, which doesn't necessarily help our business.
Right.
So I believe that probably has happened not just with Ford or the automobile industry, but industries everywhere.
That has happened with banks.
Yeah.
It has happened with not most, but many medical institutions. Yeah, that's happened a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'd urge people, I'm not opposed to people using all different media to advertise. I don't think that you should use only one thing.
Of course.
But one of the things I'd urge people to do is to analyze whether your digital advertising is leading to a conversion. Is that just because an Instagram photo gets 100 likes?
Yeah.
Did that put 100 people into the sales funnel?
Right.
Did it result in a sale? Well, probably didn't.
This is something that I spend countless hours trying to figure out and try to understand, because on the digital side, it's very, very difficult to figure out if that ad that you posted brought anybody through the door and created any revenue.
Right.
And the traditional side is a little bit easier to really find out if that source of advertising is helping your business.
How do you do that? Just ask them, how'd you find out about us?
I mean, asking is great, but I have 52 employees, and if I have to have them all ask everybody that comes to the door, how'd you find out about us? That doesn't happen.
Right.
All right. And realistically, it's not going to ever happen. So it's very difficult to track your ROI when it comes to doing anything like that. But when you do have an actual physical ad, and you could force a customer to bring that in to get that advertisement, that is a different story, where someone's not bringing their computer screen into me and saying, hey, this is what it is. So it's very, very difficult to do that. And I mean, I'm constantly changing around where I'm spending my money to advertise, and it's very difficult to do. But for your business, I think there's still value there in advertising, especially when we're in a local community like we are, that's smaller and more tight knit. I think that people may not understand that, and kind of with the whole wave of what happened with the pandemic and having people not be out and about and mostly on the computers, it may have changed a lot of that.
Yeah, it changed some of it, but we actually found that during the pandemic that people turned to us as a source of community info, perhaps even a little more than they had before.
Mm-hmm.
We have also, in the past year, we've become more aggressive in some of our coverage, especially regarding Putnam County. And that has been fairly popular with readers. We're actually a little surprised. Now, it has been unpopular with few readers, but by and large, they want to see some aggressiveness or skepticism maybe in what they read in the paper. I mean, it doesn't turn them off.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm reading any news outlet, first of all, I don't want to read just one-sided biased opinions. Right. Because all that does to me is tell me I'm reading one-sided biased opinions, and I'm not really getting the true facts of the whole story. Right. So when you have people that are out there that are looking for a specific type of content, and they want the truth at the end of the day, right? That's what we want.
At the end of the day, yes.
Right. We hope to get the truth.
Yes.
Right. And that's what we're looking for. And the problem is I think most people can agree that a large portion of the media outlets don't give you the whole truth. And they have an agenda set up for what they're trying to push.
Some of them do, yes. But let me throw out a couple of things.
Please.
One is that, there are some outlets that have an agenda and a viewpoint. MSNBC, for instance, has an agenda and a viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that they hide their agenda or their viewpoint. They're pretty upfront and they're pretty open about it.
Mm-hmm.
The CNN News, I actually don't think that they were too partisan. I mean, the last 5-6 years have been a phenomenal time in our country. And I think CNN was particularly, if we watch CNN, usually it's 8 o'clock for Anderson Cooper. And I think he's pretty straight ahead. He also is a great writer, or he has people writing for him who are very good writers. Fox News also has an agenda. But I don't think that you could look at Fox News or Newsmax or One America News and get all of your information from them
I agree.
reliably. So I would encourage people to read a lot of different sources. I think you're right on that.
So Doug and Nick, Jen, you may not, well, yes, you would know this. We used to be over on our part of the county, we used to be a one local newspaper town. Now we're a 2 local newspaper town. And I just wanted to ask you, Doug, how is that for the general public? Is that a good thing? Or can maybe we go the other way? Do you have a feel for how many of your customers are also readers of the other newspaper, Dad?
Well, many of our customers are also readers of the other paper in Cold Spring, the Highlands Current.
Yeah.
I don't mind that, but they're different products.
Yeah.
A pretty fair amount of the material in the Highlands Current actually is from Beacon. Now, my wife and I lived in Beacon for 3 years. We love Beacon. It's got a tremendous amount going on, but Beacon is not Cold Spring, and Beacon is not Phillipstown. They're different places. They have many similarities, including the Hudson River, but they're different places. It is better to have more sources, but in a long-term economic sense, you will have stronger newspapers that survive and adapt if you have fewer newspapers. I mean, we have in Putnam County right now 6 newspapers.
Really?
Yes.
Could you count them all, Nick?
No, I couldn't.
I'm not sure I could either.
We own 2 of them,
You got to-
Courier and the PC&R. Then we have the Putnam Press Times, the free tabloid you can pick up at ShopRite. Then we have the Putnam Examiner.
Yeah.
Then we have the Mahopac News. And then we have the Highlands Current. Now, with us in the Current, since you brought that up, they do different things. I mean, they pretty much own the long form narrative space. And that's okay.
I see what you mean. Yes, when
They
they do a
like to
special
do-
article on
And it wins
prison
awards.
reform or
And we're not focused on winning awards for long form journalism. We would like to win awards for designing and small space advertisement for a local advertisement. That to us would be a good award. And we're super local. We're sometimes so local, we're hokey. And
I don't think so, but I love reading. I love reading your paper. I have
that's a bad thing, but they're different products. And they've all got different strategies, but the newspaper market in Putnam County would be healthier
with your papers.
if it was pared down a little bit.
Are those other papers you meant, are they all independent or are they owned by the same?
No, they're all independent. The Press Times has its own ownership structure. Mahopac News is part of Halston Media, and they have 4 or 5 other publications. I know the publisher there, Brett Freeman. He's a friend of mine. We both serve on the New York Press Board of Directors, in fact, for the state group. Putnam Examiner is a group. Its publisher is Adam Stone. They came into Putnam, in fact, in that very brief time when the Courier was not publishing, 4 or 5 weeks in 2009, because the previous owner of the Courier had gone into bankruptcy. And then you've got the Highlands Current, which has a nonprofit status. And of their total revenue, which is about 500,000 annualized, only about 85,000 is advertising. The rest is donations and grants. So it's a different structure.
Different structure. So you've got the advertisers on the line here, all the small businesses in Putnam County. Would you restate again your pitch to them as to why they should advertise in your papers?
Sure. We are delivered into people's homes, or people buy us on the newsstand. So we are a wanted product.
Right.
And people make an effort to pick us up. Once they pick us up, we will tend to be in that person's home for several days at least.
It's true.
And it takes a little while to read the paper. We think that most people read most pages. Maybe not every page, but most pages. And there's not really a bad spot to be in our paper. I mean, it's only 12 pages. We have the largest classifieds in Putnam County of anyone. We still have a large number of legal notices, regardless of Putnam County. So we're into people's homes. And then the other thing is that you've got to remember, if you have a smartphone, one person's looking at that smartphone at a time.
Mhm.
But each of our papers is read by 2 to 3 people. So the number of people reading the paper is not simply 2,000, it's probably between 4,000 and 5,000 for each paper. So that's a bigger audience. So we think it's still an effective medium. Should it be the only thing? No. And also, I mean, you've got to have a good product to pitch people. I mean, you've got to have, a service or product offering that people want. People have got to be able to reach you. So if you have those things and you advertise, and advertising is tricky. You've got to be in front of the customer when the customer realizes they have a need. I mean, those two things kind of have to coincide in the time-space continuum.
So I have a question kind of relating to the paper, but also to the county in general,
Yeah.
and kind of what we do here. So what are you working on? What are you publishing, or maybe an article that you're kind of just in the beginning stages of that can get us excited about the vibe of business in Putnam County? Is there anything happening that's coming up, or that they've talked about in the past that we may not have recognized that you can tell us about?
I think this is a continuing thing, but I think that the demographics of Putnam County are changing every single year.
Yeah.
I think we have seen that progressively in different communities, and probably Brewster Southeast saw it first, but far from the only one. I think that we have seen additional changes during the pandemic as more people worked from home or demanded to work from home. And if you have people who work from home 3 or 4 or 5 days a week, that changes everything about your commute and your travel time and how far away you can be from the city. That puts Putnam County in the realm of being a suitable place to live, even though your job might be in New York City. So I think a lot of things have changed over time. I think that demographically, the county voter registration indicates it's becoming more democratic, although it's definitely not democratic yet, except in Phillipstown. I think it's a more diverse county. I think there's some resistance to that in some quarters.
I agree.
But you look at some of the vibrant parts of our county and small business, some of the people coming in are the most driven to succeed.
Yeah,
They're doing great businesses.
Yeah,
and it is striking to me that even in New York State, where it's hard to do business, as you know, and even with the obstacles people face, there is a tremendously vibrant business economy here.
There really is. There really is. And it's, you're right in the aspect that is growing. I mean, there's new businesses opening up, whether we realize it or not, constantly, which is a great thing, I think. I think that it offers more to the people that live here. I mean, I can tell you just from my business and the statistics that we get from Ford Motor Company, but the area that we conduct business, that Ford wants us to conduct business in, for example, over year, the Hispanic population grew 13%, which is huge.
That's a big jump.
It's a huge jump. So as a local business, we said, okay, well, we recognize this, and what are we going to do to adapt to it?
Right.
So I said, we need to have a Spanish speaking person in every department of my store.
Right.
We made that happen. You know, it's little things like that that we don't realize necessarily. So I'm glad you touched on it. One of the other big things that you mentioned in your bio, which I want to talk because I loved it, was realizing the value of a lifetime customer.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Well, I think in cars, I mean, there's a tremendous value to brand loyalty.
Mhm.
There's a tremendous value to people who come back when they want another car, either to trade in or because their previous car is worn out. Tremendous value to that person coming back. And one of the things that we've tried to do is to recognize that the value of an advertiser who's placing, let's just call it a $50 a week ad.
Mhm.
The lifetime value of that customer, when you add up $50 a week times 52 times however many years, that's a pretty good value.
Sure.
And I think that in business, too many people look at the one-time big number.
Sure.
And we don't focus in our relations with advertisers or pitches to advertisers. We don't focus on selling one full page one time.
Yeah.
We would rather sell people 4 quarter pages, or we would rather sell people 1/8 pages.
Mhm.
But we would rather have a repeat customer with some frequency and have them be in more than sell one ad one time. Also, if you sell one ad one time, one big ad one time, then you've got to go out and do that again the next week.
Yeah, not easy.
And I think that from our standpoint, it's more consistent and it's better for business to have people in regularly. And we automatically track the schedules of a number of clients. I mean, some clients are in every week, and we appreciate that.
Mhm.
Patterson Auto Body does a great business with us. They're in once a week with their specials. We have other customers who are in once a month, the first of the month, the last of the month, whatever.
Right.
We have a doctor's office in Garrison that is in twice a month. And we have a couple of insurance agents that are in the second week and the fourth week. So we'll track all that.
Yeah.
But it's better, I think, to be in front of people more frequently than to be in front of them just once. I mean, now, if you're in the Super Bowl, yeah,
it's a different story.
that's a different story.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are watching that
Yeah.
for the commercials. And I think this Super Bowl in particular is going to be phenomenal from a marketing standpoint.
It's gonna be massive.
Yeah,
It's
it
gonna
is.
be, yeah, it's absolutely true. But I think it's great advice that you can give to, local business owners, because sometimes it gets overseen, and like you said, they go for the big shot and not for that valued lifetime customer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll have to talk about the fire department again, Doug, because that's you just rang a bell for me. That's this notion of being regular. What percentage of your advertisers are more on a repeat basis?
No, the vast majority.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, 75% probably. I mean, now it's not uncommon that we'll get a request, from someone to run 1 or 2 ads. But by and large, it's people who advertise with us tend to do it with some regularity.
You know what? I think we probably should thank you, Doug, for being with us. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you would like to, before we leave you or ask you to leave, ask us or ask them?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the electric car situation and where is it going to go?
The situation right now is not great. It's that, I mean, quite honestly, they're difficult to sell. There's a very specific buyer for it, and there's not a lot of them. There's a lot of, I guess, uncertainty from the consumer standpoint of whether or not am I going to be able to charge? Am I going to be able to find a charger?
Am I going to be able to get home?
Exactly. So there's definitely that conception, and I mean, realistically, the customers that we have that do have electric cars, they love them. They absolutely love driving them. They get used to the idea of charging, when they're going to charge, how much driving they're doing, planning ahead, because the vehicle does a lot of that for you. The issue becomes, is federally, are we set up in a charging network to handle continuous driving? So you're asking about the future, where is it going to go? Until the federal government really steps on board on this and gets involved to the point where it's viable to drive a vehicle 500 plus miles and not have to worry about charging for 2 hours, then you're not going to have the consumer presence in stores to buy those vehicles. And quite frankly, they're not cheap. They're an expensive vehicle. The government tax credits are dwindling. So when you had $7,500 on every car, that's no longer the case on everything. It still is on some vehicles, but I actually did a webinar today on EV tax credits, and what they're doing now is making dealers apply for that tax credit for the customer to try to make it more convenient for the customer to buy that vehicle. However, there's a lot of paperwork that's involved in doing that and making sure that everything is perfect, because there's a risk to the dealer, there's a risk to the customer.
Right.
So we got to make sure that we're on top.
Okay.
Well, Doug, as a loyal reader of both of your papers, as well as the Highlands Current, so I'm a reader of 3 local newspapers, and I need to read those. I feel as though I need to read those papers thoroughly every week. So thank you for making sure that that's available to me. And your opinion, your Doug Cunningham says, or what do you call
Cunningham's Corner?
Cunningham's Corner is a must read, although it sometimes can be a long read, but it's
typically it's about 1,000 words. Yeah,
that's a lot to write every week.
It's a lot to write. Yeah, it is. It is. But one of the things I have tried to focus on, especially in the past few years, is the story arc and the narrative arc, and that the dynamic of putting together how things fit in time and space and place, that works better when you're telling a story. For instance, I wrote this week about Putnam County, a county legislator, and how she didn't receive any committee appointments. But to understand that, you've really got to understand how Putnam County could almost be 2 counties divided by the Taconic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you'd picked up this week's, you wouldn't have known. You really needed the backstory to get to the front story.
Yeah, and the backstory is important. I think with a lot of what's going on in county government, the backstory is important. And we know that's opinion, what I'm writing. I mean, we realize that already. We're not pretending that it's objective.
Right.
It's protected speech. It's an opinion. That's why it's on the opinion page.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. It's just what I think. But I think a lot of people, even if they disagree with me, I think a number of people appreciate the construct and how I hadn't thought of that before.
I do, and I think that's probably a good place for us to end our conversation with you, Doug. Thank you for doing that and for your independence.
It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
It's really important to all of us, I think.
Yeah,
right, Nick?
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on the show, and you gained yourself a reader, because now I'm curious.
Happy to do it. I've got a couple of copies in the car.
Great. Awesome.
Okay, good, Doug.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Voice of Putnam County Business. Let's hear a word from our sponsor. Thanks for tuning in to the Voice of Putnam County Business, brought to you by Putnam County Business Council. We are sponsored today by the Promenade on 6. Promenade on 6 is a small business hub that is set in an industrial, modern, contemporary space that is proudly showcasing all different kinds of small businesses. You have to check it out. Go to promenadeon6.com and you will get an idea of what Promenade on 6 is. And also brought to you by Park Ford. Park Ford is located right on Route 6 in Mayapack. If you are interested in purchasing a vehicle, you're going to reach out to Nick D'Andrea, 914-774-0036. But I can tell you that I have personally bought and sold, I think, about 5 vehicles with Park Ford. In fact, I have bought cars that are not Fords through them just for the fact that I don't want to deal with any other service department. These guys are world class, whether it comes to buying and selling vehicles or getting your vehicles serviced. Park Ford.